I walked away from a guaranteed career path to help Ava Miller build her empire from the ground up, only to be treated like any other low-level employee. We lived together for years, yet she kept our relationship a total secret, even going as far as posting a public denial the moment rumors started to leak. She never realized how many times I shielded her from professional ruin, earning the respect of her biggest rivals in the process. Now, the tables have turned, and I am standing across from her as the lead representative for the firm acquiring her company. Once we broke up, I handed in my resignation and made plans to take a high-level position in London. I never expected my ex, Ava, who also happened to be my boss, to show up at the airport gate to intercept me. She claimed she had fired her current assistant and promised me the role of executive vice president if I returned. But the moment I wavered and considered staying for her, she coldly shoved my hand aside. She pulled out her phone and started flirting with her assistant right in front of me. "Ethan, you were right," she said into the receiver. "This loser actually bought it and thought I was actually begging him to stay." She turned to me with a mocking smirk and told me the entire performance had been a prank. "You didn't actually think I wanted you back, did you? Get out of here if you're going, because nobody is coming to save you this time." My former coworkers were all watching and laughing as if I were a stray dog that would come crawling back the moment she snapped her fingers. What they didn't realize was that the only reason I was staying was that the firm I just signed with had finalized a massive acquisition. I was about to take over as the new CEO of the parent company. When Ava stood there looking smug about her little trick to humiliate me, I didn't feel a single spark of anger. I quietly pulled out my phone and ordered an Uber to head home. My old coworkers continued their snide remarks, asking me why I was still standing there since the boss clearly didn't want me around anymore. "Weren't you bragging about some prestigious international job offer, James? Did they realize you were a fraud and rescind it?" Ava just leaned back and watched the bullying with a bored expression, never once telling them to knock it off. She allowed them to use me as a punching bag for their insults without even a hint of intervention. This kind of toxic workplace harassment was exactly what I had endured for years under her management. In the past, this kind of treatment would have left me feeling suffocated and bitter. Even though she was my girlfriend, as well as the CEO, she never once stood up for me. Today, however, I felt completely indifferent, as if I were watching a poorly acted play. To me, they just looked like a group of pathetic circus performers. "I don't think my career path is any of your business," I said, my voice steady and cold. Ava let out a sharp, derisive laugh and looked me up and down with pure disgust. "Are you still trying to act tough? Honestly, James, if I hadn't been carrying you all these years, you probably wouldn't even be able to pay your rent. Thinking you can make it in the international market is hilarious. I was an Ivy League graduate who had a high-paying career before I met her, something most people would consider a dream job. I had been by her side since the day she founded this company, working grueling hours to make it a success. In Ava's mind, my contributions were non-existent, and she truly believed I was only successful because of her charity. I felt a wave of silent amusement. I had truly loved Ava once, and I never complained about being stuck as a middle manager despite doing most of the heavy lifting for the firm. Everything changed when Ethan Carter arrived. Ava started stripping me of my best accounts and handing them to him, then forced me to take the fall whenever he inevitably screwed them up. She criticized my performance, cut my salary, and placed me on unpaid leave while simultaneously fast-tracking Ethan for a promotion. That was the exact moment I realized our relationship was a sinking ship that I could no longer save. I quit the job and ended the relationship on the spot, deciding to move to London to start over. I never anticipated she would follow me to the airport just to play one final, cruel trick on me before I boarded my flight. I didn't feel any heartbreak, only a sense of profound disbelief. I wondered how I could have been so blind to fall for someone like her. Shaking my head, I realized she wasn't worth another second of my time. "You're absolutely right about everything, Ava. Now, can I go?" I walked away, but she suddenly lunged forward and gripped my wrist tight. She glared at me with a look of pure mockery. "Nice try with the acting, James, but we already looked into it and found out your supposed job in London is a total fabrication. Are you going to keep up this charade? Look, since we have a history, I'll give you one last chance. Come back to the office and you can work as Ethan's junior assistant. Hearing her speak as if she were doing me a massive favor, I finally saw the truth behind her little game. Outwardly, she was just playing a game with Ethan to see if I was pathetic enough to stay for her. In reality, she just wanted to keep me around as a workhorse for her and Ethan to exploit. I had to admit, Ava was doing a lot of heavy lifting to pave the way for Ethan's career. She was showering him with promotions, raises, and all the company's best resources. Meanwhile, I was the one who actually built the company and turned her dreams into reality, only to have everything stripped away from me. She was shamelessly clearing a path for her new favorite. I couldn't help but let out a dry laugh. Sorry to break it to you, but Ethan's skill set is so pathetic that I wouldn't waste my time helping him. Ava's expression darkened instantly. James, I clearly spoiled you for too long if you've become this delusional about your own importance. She was cut off when a figure suddenly hurried toward us. The moment Ava saw the man approaching, her voice turned sweet and her face lit up with a sugary smile. Ethan, she chirped. Ethan was probably the only person in the entire firm who called her by her first name instead of her title. They shared a level of intimacy that I had never experienced, even when I was officially her boyfriend. Ethan gave me a dismissive look before turning back to Ava with a smirk. See? I told you that whole London story was just a desperate excuse to get attention. And look, he's still here, Ethan added. Ava shot me a freezing look of pure contempt. Some people have such an overinflated ego that they think the entire company will collapse the moment they walk out the door. Ethan is actually talented and humble, unlike some people. If James wants to throw away a perfectly good opportunity, that's his funeral. Let's go. She started to walk away, but Ethan reached out to stop her. He put on a look of deep distress. Ava, wait, we have a problem. I haven't been able to find that watch since James quit. It was my grandmother's most precious heirloom. He turned his gaze toward me, faking a pleading expression. James, please, could you just give the watch back? Before I could even process the accusation, Ava was already staring at me with fury. James, did you steal something from him? She demanded. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but she cut me off immediately. Don't you dare lie to me. Why would Ethan ever make up something like that? Now that you're unemployed and desperate, I wouldn't put anything past you, she sneered. She then turned to the security guards nearby and barked an order. Open his suitcases and search every single thing he has. I stood there in shock, wondering if I was trapped in a nightmare. We had lived together for 10 years. She knew my character better than anyone else on the planet. Now, based on nothing but Ethan's word, she was willing to have my belongings ransacked in public and treat me like a common criminal. I tried to stay calm when she turned our breakup into a punchline. This blatant public bullying was the final straw. I didn't feel heartbroken anymore, just a searing white-hot rage and a deep sense of revulsion. That is enough, I shouted, my voice echoing through the terminal. Ethan maintained his fake facade of concern. Why are you getting so defensive, James? Unless it actually was you? Ava's gaze grew even more dismissive as she gestured for two of her staff members to restrain me. Ignore his temper tantrum and keep searching, she ordered. I was forced to watch as they dumped the contents of my suitcases onto the floor, scattering my clothes, documents, and personal belongings across the dirty tiles. My fury hit a breaking point, and I screamed for airport security, which finally forced them to back off. Ethan put on a show of being awkward. Oh, well, it looks like it isn't here. He let out a long sigh. Let's just drop it, Ava. I don't want to make things harder for James. If the watch is gone, it's gone. He probably needed the money more than I did. Ava shot me one last venomous look. He probably pawned it already, she spat. Then, she immediately pivoted, putting on a sweet, doting smile for Ethan. Don't worry about it, honey. I'll take you to get a much nicer one right now. Before they walked away, Ava gave me one final, icy glare. If you end up homeless on the streets of London, James, don't you dare come crawling back to me for help. With that, she turned and led her entourage away. Ethan walked beside her, glancing back at me with a triumphant, mocking grin. I didn't say a word, I just let out a quiet laugh. I knew something they didn't. The massive project they had staked the company's future on was currently in a total freefall. The entire firm was on the verge of a hostile takeover. The real reason I had canceled my flight wasn't because of her, but because the board of the acquiring company had just officially appointed me as the new CEO. The headquarters for the conglomerate that now owned Ava's company was based in New York, and it was a global powerhouse that everyone in the tech industry feared and respected. I had actually received a prestigious offer from them back when I was finishing my MBA because of my top-tier performance. But at the time, Ava had begged me to stay with her in Seattle and help her build her own startup from the ground up. I had turned down the opportunity of a lifetime just to support her. Shortly after our breakup, their executive recruiters reached out to me again with an even better offer. Minutes before I was supposed to board my flight, I received a call from their regional office. They informed me the board had finalized the acquisition of several local firms, including Ava Miller's entire operation. To streamline the transition, they wanted me to step in as the new CEO of the local branch. After dropping my bags at my apartment, I scheduled a meeting with the regional director, Mr. Henderson. I arrived at the upscale bistro early and was waiting near the private rooms when I spotted Ava and Ethan at a nearby table, laughing over drinks. Ava's smile vanished the moment she noticed me. An expression of pure annoyance crossed her face as she marched over in her designer heels. Seriously, James? You're like a bad penny that keeps showing up. I thought you were Mr. Independent at the airport, but here you are, following us. Before I could even respond, Ethan chimed in with an oily smirk. Come on, Ava, give him a break. He couldn't exactly agree to be my assistant in front of all those people at the airport. He had to save a little face. Look, James, if you apologize to Ava right now and admit you were wrong, maybe she'll take pity on you and find a spot for you in the mailroom. Isn't that right, Ava? Ava gave me a sharp look and pretended to think it over. Well, since Ethan is being so generous, I suppose I could reconsider. Tell you what, James, if you finish this entire bottle of wine right now, I'll think about letting you come back as a junior clerk. She gestured toward a bottle of heavy red on the table. I felt a cold surge of anger. Ava knew perfectly well that I had chronic stomach issues and was strictly forbidden from drinking, yet she was using it as a tool to humiliate me and force me to beg. She had completely miscalculated. You're delusional, Ava. I'm just here for a meeting, I replied calmly. A meeting, she scoffed. James, I've known you for a decade. I know exactly what you're doing, and it's pathetic. Are you really too proud to work for Ethan? Pride doesn't pay the bills in the real world. At that exact moment, my guest, Mr. Henderson, walked into the dining area. He immediately extended his hand to me. James, so sorry to keep you waiting. I completely ignored Ava and shook his hand with a smile. Not at all, Mr. Henderson. Let's head into the private room. It's getting a bit noisy out here with all the pests buzzing around. Absolutely. Let's get down to business, Mr. Henderson agreed. Ava was staring at me as if I had grown a second head, her jaw practically on the floor. As I started to walk away, Ethan spoke up loudly to make sure we could hear. Ethan turned to Ava and sneered. It looks like James is meeting with some headhunter, desperate to scrounge up a new job as fast as possible. A split second later, Ava lunged forward to cut me off, planting herself directly in my path. She glared up at me with a chilling, arrogant smile and said, You know, James, your audacity is starting to reach a whole new level. So you would rather struggle on your own than come crawling back to me? I should probably give you a heads up. Given your track record at my firm, I've already reached out to every major player in the Seattle area to ensure they know exactly what kind of employee you are, and frankly, you are blacklisted everywhere. Are you starting to regret your choices yet? She wore a smug grin, clearly waiting for me to break down and plead for my job back. She was in for a rude awakening, because her limited vision and mediocre talent meant she was never actually a threat to my career. Ever since I resigned, she had dumped every high-stakes project onto Ethan, and the firm was already buckling under the weight of his incompetence. She was completely oblivious to the fact that her empire was crumbling. I looked her in the eye and spoke with total composure. Ava, it is good to be confident, but I truly hope you maintain that same energy when your company goes bankrupt and is sold off for parts. James, you arrogant son of a... Ava's face contorted with rage, but she stopped herself as she turned toward my guest, Mr. Henderson. She pulled a business card from her designer bag and handed it to him with a forced air of superiority. I am Ava Miller, CEO of Miller Enterprises, and I should warn you that James used to work for me before I fired him for serious ethical violations, so you might want to reconsider whatever offer you are making him. She gave me a pointed look of triumph, linked her arm with Ethan's, and strutted away like she had just won a major victory. Mr. Henderson stared at the card in his hand for a moment before looking back at me with a raised eyebrow. Just some local drama, I said with a faint smile. Without a word, Mr. Henderson tossed her card into the nearest trash can like it was a piece of used gum. We moved into the private dining room to finalize the acquisition strategy for Ava's firm. Our plan was to leverage the catastrophic failure of their current projects to tank their valuation, allowing us to swoop in and buy the company for pennies on the dollar. Once that was settled, Mr. Henderson handed me a staff roster and asked for my professional recommendation on who should be terminated immediately. I knew every name on that list, including their actual skills and their toxic office politics. I promised him a comprehensive restructuring plan by the end of the week. After wrapping up the meeting, I headed back to my apartment, only to find Ava sitting on my sofa as if she still owned the place. She was sitting with her legs crossed, watching me with a cold, predatory gaze that made my skin crawl. "What the hell are you doing in my home?" I demanded. I glanced at the smart lock on the door and realized that in the chaos of the breakup, I had completely forgotten to revoke her biometric access. Ava ignored my question and looked at me with an icy stare. "Who leaked it to you, James? Who told you about the bankruptcy and the acquisition deal?" I focused on taking off my shoes, giving her absolutely zero attention. Her expression soured even further. "Fine, you win. The company is officially insolvent." I raised an eyebrow, genuinely impressed that Mr. Henderson had moved so quickly to finalize the paperwork after our lunch. Ava kept talking, her voice full of desperate bravado. "I have no idea how you got that inside information, but don't think for a second that this is the end for me. We were just acquired by a global conglomerate that is going to bail out our projects, and I will still be running the show as the executive in charge." I calmly brewed a cup of tea, completely unfazed by her claims. I knew exactly why her team was still in their seats for the moment. It was only because I hadn't submitted the final list of names for the mass layoffs yet. "And your point is?" I asked, taking a slow sip. Ava leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "I want you to hand over your entire client database to Ethan immediately. In exchange, I'll secure you a middle management position in the new corporate structure. You need to understand that with this new backing, the firm is going to be unstoppable, and offering you a job now is a massive favor." I couldn't help but laugh at her sheer audacity, as if she were handing me a golden ticket. In reality, as soon as the transition was complete, the board would implement the restructuring plan I had authored. It stated very clearly that every position would be reevaluated based strictly on merit and performance, not personal history or favoritism. Ava was clearly trying to strip me of my network to pad Ethan's resume, hoping those numbers would justify making him a vice president in a new organization. It was almost touching how hard she was working to protect her boy toy, but she had no idea she was backing a loser. "You really are incredibly naive, Ava," I said softly. Her face fell, and she stood up abruptly, stalking toward me with a look of intense condescension. "I get it, James. You are consumed with jealousy over Ethan, and you can't stand the fact that I actually care about him more than I ever cared about you. You're obsessed with why I treated you like an employee while I treat him like a king. The truth is we aren't even in the same league anymore. I am the owner and the visionary, while you are just a replaceable laborer. To be honest, a guy like you is beneath me now. Ethan is different. He brings an excitement into my life that you could never provide, and he makes me feel things you never could." Ava gave me one last lingering look, her voice dropping to a fake, gentle tone. "I will give you exactly one night to think about my offer." With that, she turned and walked out the door. I just shook my head at the absurdity of it all and immediately went to the console to wipe her access from the security system. Then, I sat down on my laptop and hit send on the final list of terminations scheduled for the morning. The next day, I dressed in a tailored suit and headed to the office to officially begin my tenure. The moment I stepped onto the floor, the office was buzzing with nervous energy and rumors about the acquisition. Ava was standing in the center of the room, spinning a fantasy about how she was still in charge and promising everyone that as long as they worked hard, their jobs were safe. When she spotted me, her eyes lit up with a predatory gleam, and she marched over with an air of absolute triumph. "Well, James, have you come to your senses? Are you ready to hand over those client files to Ethan?" I couldn't help but let out a genuine laugh as I shook my head. Ava's face hardened, but before she could snap at me, Ethan burst out laughing. "Seriously, James, what are you even doing here? If you aren't here to surrender the files, why show up? Don't tell me you actually think you still have a job here." His comment triggered a wave of snickering from the rest of the staff. I just shrugged and nodded calmly. "Actually, yes, I am here to work." The crowd erupted into full-blown laughter, with people whispering that I must be so desperate I was trying to reapply for my old job under the new owners. "Hey, James, I thought you were some big shot moving to London. Did you forget to pack your dignity?" a former co-worker shouted, drawing more laughs. Ava's expression turned murderous as she cut through the noise. "James, knock it off right now. I offered you a lifeline yesterday by letting you work for Ethan, and you're throwing it away. Are you really going to be this stubborn? Did you not hear a single word I said? Do you actually want to be blacklisted and broke?" I just looked at her with pity and shook my head. "Ava, I think you are confused. You're the one who is out of a job, and you should probably start thinking about how you're going to pay your legal fees." Ava blinked in surprise before bursting into a derisive cackle. "Did you all hear that? James has officially lost his mind. He thinks he can fire me? I founded this company, you pathetic loser. As long as I'm standing here, you won't even be able to get a job as a janitor in this building." Before she could finish her rant, a group of executives in high-end suits walked through the front doors. It was the transition team from the parent company, led by Mr. Thompson. Ava's face went pale for a split second before she plastered on a fake professional smile and rushed over to greet them. "Mr. Thompson, what a pleasure to see you. I was just wondering when our new CEO would be arriving so I could personally welcome them to the firm." Mr. Thompson barely acknowledged her existence as he walked right past her and headed straight for me. He gave me a respectful nod and turned to the assembled staff. "Everyone, it is my privilege to introduce the new Chief Executive Officer of this division, Mr. James Sullivan." The smile on Ava's face froze instantly, turning into a mask of pure shock. There must be some mistake," she stammered, her voice trembling. "James is a mid-level manager with no real leadership skills. How could he possibly be chosen to?" Mr. Thompson cut her off by slamming a folder onto the nearest desk. It was a termination list I had finalized the night before. "Your names are at the very top of the list, Ms. Miller," Thompson said coldly, pointing at her and Ethan. "Both of you are being terminated effective immediately. Please clear out your desks and leave the premises." Ava grabbed the document with shaking hands, her face draining of color as she saw her own name in bold letters. She looked at me, her eyes wide with terror and disbelief. "How is this happening? James, you can't be the CEO. This is some kind of sick prank, right?" Mr. Thompson let out an annoyed huff and glared at her. "Do you honestly think a man of Mr. Sullivan's caliber has time to play games with someone like you?" James Sullivan was a priority hire for the New York office, and the board handpicked him to lead this acquisition. "I'm aware of your history, but if you were too blind to recognize his value while he was working for you, that is your own failure." Ava stood there, completely paralyzed, unable to find a single word to defend herself. The rest of the staff, who had been laughing just moments ago, were now staring at me in absolute silence. It was clear they were struggling to reconcile the office nobody they had bullied for years with the powerful executive now standing before them. The silence was broken by a sudden rush of people trying to get into my good graces. "James, man, I was just joking earlier. You know how it is," one of the senior leads said, grabbing my hand. "We were all just following orders from Mike. I always knew you were the real brains behind this operation." The room was suddenly filled with a chorus of apologies and sycophantic praise. The contrast between their earlier mockery and this desperate fawning was nauseating. I wasn't fooled for a second. They were only sucking up because they were terrified of being the next ones out the door. I decided to hold off on the rest of them for now. Firing the entire staff on my first day would look like a personal vendetta rather than a business move. Restructuring required a calculated, systematic approach to minimize disruptions. However, Ava and Ethan were cancer on this company, and they had to be cut out immediately. Seeing her world fall apart, Ava panicked. She shoved her way through the crowd and grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. "James, please," she whimpered, her voice full of desperate manipulation. "You can't do this to me. We were together for 10 years. You can't just throw me away like this. I have always loved you more than anyone. Maybe my pushing you away was actually a blessing in disguise since it led you here. Can't we just start over? Can't we be a power couple?" She looked at me with those wide, pleading eyes that used to work on me, but all I could think about was the years of psychological abuse. I remember the time a slip of the tongue revealed our relationship to a few colleagues. Ava had gone ballistic when the rumor spread. To prove she didn't show favoritism, she had sent out an all-staff memo strictly forbidding anyone from mentioning our private lives under threat of termination. That same month, she humiliated me in front of the whole department and slashed my bonus just to save face. Now, here she was stripping away every ounce of her pride to beg me for a second chance in front of the same people. I let out a sharp, cold laugh. "Ava, do you honestly think there is any universe where I would take you back?" "James, I was wrong about everything. I was spoiled and I didn't appreciate you, but I promise I will change. If you have to fire someone, fire Ethan. He was the one who stole your work and manipulated me into turning against you. This is all his fault, not mine." She whipped around and snarled at Ethan with terrifying venom. "Ethan, why are you still standing here? If James hadn't covered for your massive blunders last year, you would have been fired months ago. You've destroyed every account I gave you since he left. You are a worthless parasite, so get the hell out of here." The sudden betrayal left the entire office in a state of shock. Ethan looked like he had been physically struck. His face went pale, his eyes welled up with tears, and his voice cracked. "Ava, how can you say that to me?" "Shut up," she snapped, cutting him off with cold precision. "Don't you dare use my first name. I am your superior, and I am telling you to leave." It was a shocking display, yet completely in character for her. Ava had always been a narcissist who would sacrifice anyone to save herself. I remembered how she had threatened to leave me when I was a new graduate, forcing me to turn down elite job offers just to help her launch her little startup. "James, look at me. I'm choosing you over him. I have always loved you. You can't fire me from the company we built with our own hands. You can't just abandon me like this." She looked up at me with tears streaming down her face, using every manipulation tactic in the book. I looked down at her with nothing but indifference. "Both of you need to leave this building immediately. I'm not going to ask a second time. This was a place of business, and I had no interest in her dramatic performance." Within seconds, security arrived and escorted both Ava and Ethan toward the elevators. A few of the employees scrambled to pack up their belongings, literally throwing their things into boxes and dumping them by the exit to prove their loyalty to me. Once the two of them were finally gone, the heavy, toxic atmosphere in the office finally started to lift. "Everyone back to your stations. I want the quarterly reports and project statuses in my inbox by lunch," I announced. I turned and walked into the corner office that used to belong to Ava. The cleaning crew had already scrubbed it clean of her presence. We had built this firm together, and I had personally paid for most of the high-end furniture and equipment in this room out of my own pocket. Yet in all those years, I had never been allowed to spend a single day working in here. Ava's favorite line was always that I was just an employee and it wouldn't look right for me to occupy the executive suite. Of course, when it came to Ethan, she had no problem letting him spend all day in here, flirting and wasting time while I did the actual work. I pushed those memories aside. They were part of a life I had moved past. I pulled up a website and ordered a completely new set of office decor, determined to erase every lingering trace of her. Around noon, one of the junior associates knocked tentatively on my door and held out his phone. "Mr. Sullivan, you might want to see what happened outside the building this morning." I took the phone and watched a video of Ava and Ethan being forcibly removed by security, both of them screaming and looking absolutely unhinged. In the video, Ethan grabbed her arm, demanding to know how she could betray him so easily in front of everyone. Ava's demeanor shifted instantly back to her manipulative, sweet self as she cupped his cheek. "Honey, I had to do it to save us. If one of us stayed, we could have helped the other." I never expected James to be such a cold, heartless prick. Ethan still looked devastated, but his posture slumped as he fell for her lies once again. "Do you really mean that, Ava?" She leaned in and gave him a quick, performative kiss. "Of course I do, baby. Just go home and wait for my call. I'm going to figure this out, I promise." Ethan suddenly grabbed her and pinned her against the wall, kissing her deeply as if to reclaim her. After a long moment, he pulled away, breathless, and nodded in agreement. The video cut to black, and the associate lowered his voice. "Sir, you need to be careful with her." Everyone in the office knew they had been sleeping together for the last 3 years. I sat there in stunned silence, not even sure how to process that level of betrayal. It was so incredibly absurd that I almost wanted to laugh at my own stupidity. What exactly had I been in love with all those years? I dismissed the employee, needing a moment of silence to wrap my head around the depth of her deception. Later that evening, as I was unlocking my apartment door, I felt someone rush up behind me. Before I could turn around, a pair of arms wrapped tightly around my waist, and I felt warm, frantic breath against my neck. "James," she whispered in a sultry, desperate voice, her hands beginning to wander over my chest. I felt a surge of revulsion and violently shoved her away before flipping on the hallway lights. Ava was standing there, her makeup smeared and her clothes disheveled, looking at me with a mix of confusion and predatory intent. "James, honey, why are you being like this?" she asked. A wave of pure nausea washed over me. It was less than 24 hours ago that she was sitting in this same spot, acting like a queen and threatening to destroy my career if I didn't give her what she wanted. Now, she was trying to use her body to manipulate me back into her trap. I wondered how many different masks this woman actually owned. "Get out," I spat, the word dripping with venom. Ava didn't budge, stepping closer into my personal space. "I am not leaving, James. You don't actually want this to end. I gave you the best years of my life, and you can't just throw that away. You were just hurt and jealous because of Ethan, but I've already ended things with him. Why are you being so cruel to me?" If I hadn't seen that video of her kissing him just hours ago, her performance might have actually been convincing. Even without the evidence of her cheating, there was no chance of a reconciliation, but seeing her lie so effortlessly was chilling. "Ava, it is over. Stop harassing me and stay away from my home." She began to sob hysterically, the tears streaming down her face. "Have you forgotten everything you promised me? You said you would love me forever, James. Please, just give me one more chance to make it right." She reached in her bag and pulled out a small, velvet box, opening it to reveal an expensive, custom-made watch. "I had this commissioned specifically for you," she whispered, looking at me with feigned adoration. "I never intended to give it to Ethan. It was always meant for you, because you're the only man who ever mattered." Looking at that watch made my blood run cold as I remembered her and Ethan accusing me of theft at the airport and humiliating me in public. "I'm going to say this one last time. Get the hell out of my house." Ava's face turned a deep shade of crimson as she realized her seduction had failed. She snatched the watchbox back and glared at me with pure hatred. "You are going to regret this, James," she screamed before slamming the door behind her. For the next week, she finally went silent. Under my leadership, the firm finally began to function like a professional organization again. With the resources of the parent company behind us, we were hitting our milestones ahead of schedule. I focused on hiring actual talent to fill the leadership roles and began systematically weeding out the toxic hangers-on from the previous administration. I was just finishing up a morning briefing when my phone rang. It was Ethan, and he sounded like he was having a total nervous breakdown. "James, you son of a bitch, where is she? What did you do to Ava? Her phone is off. She hasn't been home in 2 days, and I know you're behind this." I leaned back in my chair, my voice dripping with boredom. "Are you done with the hysterics, Ethan? I have no idea where Ava is, and I care even less." "You're lying," he shrieked. "She went to your place and never came back. If you don't tell me where she is right now, I'm calling the cops." He slammed the phone down before I could respond. I didn't give his threat a second thought since I had nothing to hide. However, my assistant, Mr. Thompson, had clearly overheard the conversation. "Actually, sir, the last time I saw Ms. Miller, she was leaving a hotel with Mr. Henderson. They seemed quite comfortable with each other." I felt a flicker of annoyance. Mr. Henderson was the regional executive responsible for overseeing the merger, and Ava had no business being anywhere near him. Thompson continued, looking a bit uncomfortable. "From what I've heard, she basically threw herself at him. I'm not sure if she's blackmailing him or if they made some kind of backroom deal, but they've been seen together all over town." He pulled up a video on his tablet showing Ava and Henderson sharing an intimate dinner at a high-end steakhouse. "I'm concerned she's trying to manipulate him to regain some influence here. Since he's the regional head and you report to the main office, any scandal involving him could reflect poorly on the entire operation." I gave a curt nod and immediately forwarded the video link to Ethan. If he was so desperately worried about her safety, I figured he deserved to see exactly who she was spending her nights with. I was genuinely curious to see how his fragile ego would handle the realization that he was already being replaced. The drama reached its peak that evening. I was walking to dinner with Thompson when we witnessed a chaotic scene outside a nearby restaurant. Ava was being dragged out of the building by her hair, held by a sophisticated, middle-aged woman who looked absolutely livid. Ava's expensive designer jacket was shredded, and she was already sporting several visible bruises. A crowd had gathered to record the spectacle on their phones, but Henderson was nowhere to be seen. "You pathetic homewrecker!" the woman screamed, landing another blow. "Did you really think you could sleep with my husband and get away with it? You are nothing but a cheap, low-class whore." The woman continued her assault until Ava was bleeding and sobbing on the pavement. When Ava managed to look up, she spotted Ethan standing in the crowd. She lunged toward him, screaming at the top of her lungs. "This is all your fault, Ethan. You've ruined my life. I finally had a chance with Henderson, and you went and destroyed it." Ethan didn't even hesitate before striking her across the face so hard she spun around. "You have the nerve to blame me," he roared, his voice trembling with fury. "You sent me to beg James for help while you were busy jumping into bed with some old executive? I spent the last 48 hours losing my mind trying to find you, only to find out you were cheating on me. You're a disgusting liar." Ava had taken kickboxing classes for years, and she started landing heavy blows on Ethan without a hint of hesitation. He was crying out in pain, but the agony only fueled his rage as he began wildly swinging his fists back at her. Standing on the edge of the crowd, I felt a dark, satisfying sense of justice watching the two of them destroy each other. The spectacle of them tearing each other apart was more entertaining than any movie I had ever seen. The police eventually arrived to break up the brawl and took both of them into custody. Ava was released after a week, but Ethan was still facing assault charges, and I couldn't have cared less about their miserable lives. About a month later, I ran into Ava again at a high-level networking event. She was draped over the arm of an older, wealthy-looking man, acting as if she owned a room. It wasn't Henderson this time, but Pablo Sullivan, a major contractor we were considering for a partnership. "James, fancy meeting you here," she cooed, her eyes full of fake warmth. "I heard you're interested in the new development project my husband is managing. If you get down on your knees and apologize right now, I might consider putting in a good word for you." I looked at her with pure disdain, noticing that while she was still attractive, she now had a desperate, hardened look about her. I treated her like she was invisible and walked straight to my seat. I later found out from a contact that she had seduced Pablo within days of meeting him. Something felt off about the whole situation, Pablo was a notorious shark in the industry, and he wasn't the type to take on someone with Ava's legal and financial baggage unless there was something in it for him. I hired a private investigator to dig into their partnership, and the truth came out almost immediately. After Ava started dating Pablo, his firm began winning major contracts that Henderson had previously been guaranteed. When I followed the money, the pieces of the puzzle finally started to fit together. While she was sleeping with Henderson, Ava had managed to gain access to his private server and steal highly classified bidding data, which she then sold to Pablo. I wasn't about to let her get away with corporate espionage. Once I had all the evidence, I filed a formal complaint with the authorities and sued her for the theft of trade secrets. When the subpoena was served, Ava stormed into our lobby and started screaming like a banshee. "James Sullivan, get your coward's ass out here right now. You are a pathetic, small-minded snake. How could you do this to me? I can't believe I wasted a single second of my life on a man as disgusting as you." I walked out to meet her, and she immediately tried to lunge at me, but the security team held her back. I looked at her with absolute coldness. "Ava, every single thing that is happening to you right now is a direct result of your own choices. If you hadn't broken the law, we wouldn't be standing here." In that moment, I felt nothing for her but a deep, final sense of revulsion. "Get her out of my sight," I said to the guards before turning my back on her forever. A week later, the court handed down its verdict, and Ava was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for corporate espionage. Henderson was forced to resign in disgrace, and the board officially promoted me to take over all of his regional responsibilities. As I was leaving the courthouse, I noticed a man limping toward me through the parking lot. As he got closer, I realized it was Ethan. His once perfectly groomed face was now covered in a ragged beard, and he looked like he hadn't slept in months, but the most shocking part was the jagged scar running down the side of his jaw. I assumed the scar was a permanent souvenir from his street fight with Ava, but the limp was new. "Ethan," I said, stopping by my car. He looked up at me with hollow, haunted eyes. "James, I came here to apologize for everything. While I look back at those projects we worked on, I realized I was the one who stole your credit and forced you to take the fall for my mistakes. I ended up taking the executive position that should have been yours from the start. I'm truly sorry for what I did. Serving my time in prison gave me far too much time to reflect on my actions. While Ava certainly deserved her downfall, I realize now that I am just as much to blame for the path we took. I genuinely wish you the best of luck with everything moving forward." I stood there in complete shock, unable to figure out why he was suddenly seeking absolution from me after everything that happened. Ethan's eyes began to glisten with tears, and his voice shook with a raw, painful emotion as he continued to speak. "I really did love her with everything I had. I convinced myself that if I could just steal her away from you, I would somehow inherit the successful life you had built. Instead, I ended up being nothing more than a pathetic joke, didn't I?" He gave a bitter and weary shake of his head before limping away into the crowd. That was the last time I ever laid eyes on Ethan Carter. After she was processed into the system, Ava Miller actually had the nerve to send a message through her lawyer asking me to visit her because she felt so isolated. I didn't even bother to respond to her request. Every single tie that bound us together was severed the moment the judge read the final verdict. Whatever happens to her for the rest of her life is no longer a concern of mine. 5 years have passed since that day, and the company's valuation has tripled under my leadership. The board of directors officially promoted me to oversee all North American operations. My career has reached heights that the younger version of me would have never dared to dream of. I heard through the grapevine of old co-workers that Ava was recently released on parole, though her mental health has supposedly deteriorated significantly. Her relatives apparently took her back to a small town in the Midwest, where she ended up getting married and settling into a quiet and unremarkable life. As for me, I continue to move forward on the path I've paved for myself. For the first time in my life, I am living solely for my own happiness and success. I spent 10 years helping her build an empire only to be publicly degraded for my loyalty. I left that office with everyone laughing at me, but I returned as the CEO of the conglomerate that bought her out. Ava eventually became the architect of her own imprisonment through her greed and arrogance. Some people will always mistake your kindness for weakness and treat you as if you were disposable. It was never a matter of me not being enough. The truth was that she simply never deserved me. My victory wasn't just about the professional revenge. It was the realization that the only person who will never betray you is the one you see in the mirror when you finally learn to love yourself.